I have news for you. Good news. The announcement by Ford of Dagenham of 2 new cars.
Every day I get you.
This is the story of a company that brought us the American dream and put ordinary Brits on wheels.
My dad had a Cortina and he loved that car.
Fords were part of my family life.
It's the story of how a company sold us cars that turned us on.
Have you ever seen the shape of the back of a lovely woman's head? That's just like the back of a Capri.
It's an extension of your penis, isn't it? Let's face it.
It's about battles with the competition.
Ford had a very clear vision as to what it was about. It was about conquest and it was about success.
And how, as Britain became middle class, we demanded more.
Suddenly, nobody really wanted a Ford anymore.
It's the story of Ford and me. After the war, it wasn't just Spitfires that turned our heads. Cars were scarce, and rush hour took just minutes.
Totally different relationship with cars then, and any sort of car that was around in the village was sort of something to really go and have a look at.
There was no chance of anybody on our street having a car. When you saw a car on the actual street that I lived on, it was the rent man coming round.
The Brits were making posh cars, like Jaguars, Somersets and Westminsters. Then, in the 1950s, Ford brought us something totally new. The Three Graces gave ordinary people a slice of American glamour.
The new Zodiac, the new Zephyr, and the new Consul.
The Three Graces came out and we all went round and the cars were introduced to us. You could sit in them, have a look at them. I remember the Consuls were all green and yellow, a green bottom and a yellow top, and they did look nice when they were on show.
Yes, madam, they are real.
They were just beautiful machines, and the performance, of course, was wonderful. And it was hard at the time to imagine how technology could possibly develop beyond the levels of the cars at that time.
The Three Graces set our hearts aflutter. Romance had arrived on our roads.
They say for every boy and girl there's just one love in this whole world, and I know I found mine.
I was a bit pushed for cash, but I had my dream car.
Ford's dream cars helped make our dreams come true.
When you spot a beautiful young lady, you've got to use all sorts of means and ways of means to sort of grab her attention. And I had the Consul, which was a major advantage. So I went to her house, and when I saw her walking down the road, I slowly drifted up alongside her, and I said, "Miss, would you like a lift us round?" And she didn't hesitate, she got straight in.
Oh, I thought it was marvellous. Such a lovely modern car. They're a different shape to any of the others. I thought it was lovely.
The bench seat was wonderful. You only had to do a left-hand turn, and the seats are quite slippery. So the young lady would sort of, my darling wife here, would slide across the wardrobe like this. And I know it'd be illegal now, but we frequently drove around like this. It was quite the thing to do, you know.
As Ford sold us cars for courting and cuddling, the government brought us new roads, American style.
M1, Britain's first motorway, is the beginning of a new deal for drivers. And traffic was soon taking this opportunity of trying out a new experience in British road travel.
When the M1 was opened, past the sort of the grandstand swarmed cars travelling at a speed that people had virtually never previously encountered. And there was some dismay that these roads could become nothing more than racetracks and extremely dangerous.
Mr. Marples had a word of warning to all high-speed motorists.
For on this magnificent road, the speed which can easily be reached is so great that senses may be numbed and judgment warped.
Ford Zephyrs helped the police control our motorway madness. Telly was taking off too, and one hit show made a star of the Zephyr.
And when we saw the Zed Cars series, we thought, my goodness, there goes my bread and butter.
The original Zed Cars was a very pleasant surprise to Ford of Britain, because it was based on the Merseyside police, and the Merseyside police used Ford-based police cars. It was as simple as that. So there was no Ford influence whatsoever. It was an accident in a way.
So shut up, keep quiet.
A happy accident. Ford had stumbled across the marketing power of product placement.
Zed Cars as a television series obviously had quite an impact, particularly on the public. And in fact, when I got married, the local press picked up on the fact that my wife and I were both members of the same police force, and the headline read, "Zed Car Driver Marries."
Zed Cars moved Ford up a gear, but the British Motor Corporation, BMC, were about to fight back with a mini masterpiece. By the 60s, we were getting richer, and for about £500 you could buy Ford's new car, the Anglia.
It had a very modern engine, very modern transmission, and a very modern look. And I think it was aimed squarely at what we perceived to be the starter market.
But Big Boys BMC had their eyes on the same market and bounced back with a car that was pure Chelsea.
The Mini was very much the icon and the car to be seen in. Instant success, everybody wanted one.
The Mini was amazing because it was a very small car, and until then, smart had been large. But the Mini was tiny. It wasn't threatening, it wasn't very mechanical. It was more like a pet, really.
A pet hate for the folks at Ford.
The Mini might be small in stature, but it was big in fear for us. 4 of us get in this little Mini, and the fact that we got in astounded us for a start. We got in and said, this is a problem. We're all in this little car, and off we went to drive it, and we were very impressed with the vehicle. It was a brilliant design.
The Mini was a giant success, cheaper than the Anglia and more advanced. Ford were desperate to know its secret.
So we couldn't wait to tear a Mini to pieces and put all the parts on the wall on large movable boards that we had. Weigh every part, cost every part, and compare it to our design.
The upshot of that analysis was they realised that in their estimation, the Mini only cost 30 shillings less to make than the Anglia, and the Anglia we were charging £50 more.
We couldn't see how they would make a profit in selling the car at the price they were selling it at.
The secret was out. BMC were bonkers. They were losing money on every Mini.
It was simply stupid to do what they had done. And there they were selling a hot car, and the price was too low.
They deluded themselves into believing that the Mini could set the market alight. It did from a desirability point of view, but it was the death knell for the manufacturer.
BMC was selling their way into trouble with the tiny, trendy Mini. Now, as we got richer, Ford wanted to win the business battle with the ultimate family car, but they faced a deadly rival from Germany.
In the beginning of the 60s, late 50s, early 60s, Ford of Britain and Ford of Germany were direct competitors. They sold under the Ford banner, they were owned by Ford Motor Company, but they competed directly against. And I have to say, to some extent, there was the rivalry that was left over from World War II.
Ford of Germany was secretly planning to grab the British market with American help. Ford of Britain's boss, Sir Patrick Hennessy, got wind of it.
Sir Patrick went to the States and he discovered, by the whispers, that the States were developing a program together with Ford of Germany called the Cardinal Program. So he came back, called a board meeting and said, we have to have a program that matches them.
I suggested if they called it Cardinal, why didn't we call our project Archbishop? I have to say the Americans were not very pleased about this because they saw themselves being sent up.
We were in a meeting and the guy said, say, why did you call it Archbishop as a code name? I said, because you called yours Cardinal. And the guy said, you dumb shit, a cardinal is an American bird.
The German-US axis had a head start. Now Ford of Britain had to close the gap.
Sir Patrick set conditions which most people's view were virtually unachievable.
We had a target for everything. We had weight, cost, function.
And every time we had a cost saving, they went mad, and every time they had a cost saving, we went mad.
Tempers frayed as D-Day approached.
I remember one time that we were discussing the cost and the feasibility of the front end around the headlamp and bumper area, and that the discussion became so intense that the chief designer took a meat cleaver, it looks like a meat cleaver, and hacked the front end off the car. Said, all right, get out of here. He literally hacked the front end off the car.
Time for Ford UK to engage the enemy.
The Archbishop program was launched to Ford top management at the French racing circuit near Paris, Montlhéry.
Ford of Britain arrived with its sales team and Ford of Germany arrived with their sales team, and they produced their products.
But Ford UK had a secret weapon. Hidden under the bonnet of one of their cars was a souped-up engine that would drive the opposition right off the track.
Henry Ford was there, and this car was drawn to his attention.
And no one was allowed to drive it apart from a test driver. And he just hammered it round. And it had a fairly non-standard exhaust system, and it made the most exhilarating noise, and that just sort of blew everybody away. And we want that one, we don't want anything else.
Henry Ford was so delighted with this that he said, right, okay, you can go ahead and produce that. No presentations, nothing, just, okay, do it.
Gotta go. I hope you're ready, gone. Take a look at
British Ford had done it. Archbishop became Cortina, and our favourite name in motoring was born.
It's an icebreaker. The first thing you say when you meet someone is, hi, what's your name? Cortina. Oh, wow, where does that come from? So you automatically get into a conversation. It makes people laugh.
But the positive side was that nobody ever forgot my name. For all of the sort of the negatives of having the same name as a car, it means that, you know, through my life, nobody's ever forgot my name. On the other hand, I wish the jokes were more original, because did you come with your Escort, and is your name Ford? And
if I put my key in your ignition, will I turn you on? Yeah.
Ford needed to turn us on too, so they pushed Cortina into the bosom of popular British comedy.
For a vehicle with such a high potential for us, there was a need to have glamour, excitement, pizzazz.
Carry On Films came to us and said, well, we need 30 cars. and we just need them for 2 days. So we stopped the press fleet, and we went to see marketing, and we borrowed most of their motor cars, and we were able to come up with 30 assorted Cortinas, and they were all shipped out on transporters, and were filmed for 2 days over a weekend, and then put back onto the fleets on Monday morning.
Right, girls. This is it. I want you to get out there and grab all the business from under their smug male noses. I don't
Ford
care
had learned the lesson of Zed Cars very well.
Just get the fares in your
The philosophy
cabs.
was we must explore every avenue of opportunity.
Just flash your headlamps at them.
If someone is prepared to give our product exposure and it's not going to be detrimental, we should be doing it, and we should be doing everything possible to make sure that it happens.
Wagons, row!
Ford took Cortina racing too, and blew the competition away.
Well, it was always Enzo Ferrari who said, win on Sunday, sell a car on Monday. And so Ford simply took that to heart, really, and if you have a racing version of a Cortina, it does cast a halo over the whole range.
If you went quickly in a Lotus Cortina, you could not be on 4 wheels. You had to be on an absolute maximum of 3 wheels, and quite often in 2 wheels. It wasn't an invitation to drive, it was a challenge.
It was a challenge we couldn't wait to take up. Ford had invented the boy racer.
Charlie says...
When we are all waiting patiently at the traffic lights, there's nothing more aggravating than the chap who cuts in.
The car of choice was a Ford Cortina 1600E with the extra tuned-up engine and the deluxe bits on the wheels and the racing trim. On the second day of ownership, I went out to give it a spin and, you know, show off at the traffic lights like you do, which was the whole point of owning it. And I got to the first lights, and there was some kid in his father's Vauxhall next to us. He'd obviously just passed his driving test. And he took one look at me and he thought, flash git. So he thought he was going to beat me off the lights in this Vauxhall Cresta or whatever it was. And, of course, the lights turned amber, and I was over the hill like that because the 1600E, silver, untouchable. I pulled over and waited so that I could gloat as he went past. Why else would you do it? So he comes beetling over the hill, really angry, and he thinks, right, I'm going to show him, I'm going to give him a lesson. And he thought he'd drive really close and rock the car and give me a bit of a shock because I'm leaning out the window like that. But unfortunately, he had only just passed his driving test, and he rear-ended the Cortina and wrote it off outside Shepherd's Bush police station.
Ford were laughing too, until disaster struck.
Cortina was very much riding the crest of the wave. You know, sales were going off the clock in a way. It was about to become the best-selling motor car in Britain. Ford Britain was in excess of 30% of the market, and suddenly, lo and behold, we have a motoring journalist who said, I've shot off the road backwards, and I'm not really quite sure how I did it because it wasn't raining and it wasn't greasy and there wasn't any snow. We had a major problem.
Well, we did. We had a problem with the transmission, with the gearbox.
In a particular circumstance, it was possible to lock the transmission with some fairly interesting results. Happily, no one was killed.
Thousands of Cortinas had to be recalled, and quietly. Ford knew a dangerous car could kill the company. PR guru Walter Hayes did everything to pull the wool over our eyes.
Poor old Walter, as Director of Public Affairs, he had a tiger by the tail, you know? And all his friends in Fleet Street, ex-friends, or still friends, were phoning Walter up to say, hey, what's happening, what's happening? Hold your horses, fellas. When we got something for you, we'll tell you.
Marketing spin pulled Ford back from the brink.
Nothing was ever published, no. People got fairly close to it, but then were able to sort of convince themselves that perhaps they didn't have a story anyway, and that perhaps it was just another stupid motoring journalist.
Ford had kept it secret, and we couldn't get enough of the Cortina. Over the next 20 years, almost 3 million of us bought one. making Ford £500 million profit. We got our family car. Now, as the 60s advanced, we wanted to rock and roll.
Transit, the super van. Big, fast, efficient. Smooth, easy to drive.
Transit is one of the most important vehicles ever made. I mean, they ran that commercial. Very rare that car commercials tell even approximately the truth. But they ran that commercial saying the Transit built Britain. It did. And it created rock and roll. There would be no rock and roll bands were it not for the Transit van.
If you had a Transit, then, I mean, you were a proper band, weren't you?
You were.
It was just the perfect van. It looked good, it was a bit cool. You sat up a bit high, so, you know, you felt somebody in it. You could get all your gear in the back. You had good bench seat. You know.
Easy loading. You could get, the bench seat, very important. You could pack the whole band, like, shoulder to shoulder across the bench seat.
Yeah, or very useful if you got lucky after a gig.
I can go any way, we are two. I can live anyhow, we'll all live. I can go any way.
Even second-hand, Transits were the only choice for any self-respecting rock star.
Where do I advertise a perfect Transit van? The Melody Maker.
So we look in the Melody Maker, and there's Transit Luton Transit with tail lift. You know, I can't remember how much the price was, but call this number, so we did. And it's Johnnie Walker! It's Johnnie Walker! You know, Johnnie Walker! It's him, Radio 1. So, you know, the whole band has to come and see the van, of course. You know, we all piled down to Johnny's house, and there's this Transit parked outside.
You know, I did a bit of social smoking at the time, you know, and I had some of this amazing Thai stick, it was called.
You burst that around, the whole band are like off our faces because this thing had gone around. He didn't tell us what was in it. So we're completely hallucinating. And Johnny says, now this is how this drives. So he puts us all in the cab, all crammed in, and drives it for us.
Laughing up the miles, swiftly, safely, economically.
Johnny stopped at a service station to put some petrol in it, and he bought some chocolates and stuff and put them on the dashboard. And, of course, ravening munches and completely out of your head. And I just sat there as we were going over this viaduct and ate all Johnny's chocolate. It's just like, boom, 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 completely oblivious and unaware that Johnny's kind of looking at what the hell's going on here.
A lot of miles and a lot of punishment.
Went back to your house and parked. You know, out come the £10 nuts. Here, well, hey, we'll take it, we'll take it. Definitely, that was a great driving experience.
Yeah. See, I'd refine my sales technique.
Ford had refined its sales technique too. The Transit offered us all a chance to build a proper business.
As we changed after World War II, getting up into the 60s, as prosperity grew, and there was more and more demand for dry cleaners and flower shops and plumbers and small businessmen and do-it-yourself men and countless small businesses, the Transit just was right in the center of that. It was perfect for anything, anything that you wanted to carry.
Before the Transit, truckers had a stranglehold on road haulage.
If you applied for a licence to operate a vehicle for hire reward, you had to sit in front of a board of people made up mainly by the established hauliers in your area. So as soon as you told them what work you wanted a licence for, two things happened. One, you got turned down, and secondly, they were knocking on your prospective customer's door and took the work away from you. So you actually ended up never getting a licence.
At under 3 tons, you didn't need a haulier's licence to drive a Transit. The trucker's stranglehold was broken.
The hauliers did not know how to deal with this. It was a new phenomenon to them. They didn't know what to do or how to stop us because, of course, their customers loved us. We were doing everything that they were doing for less money, and we were doing it twice as quickly.
The Transit changed the way we worked, but Ford's women workers were about to change Britain forever.
We all made car seats of one sort or another for Zephyrs, Zodiacs, Anglias, Cortinas, over the years we did so many different models.
The trim ladies of Dagenham's River Plant had a fearsome reputation.
The River Plant was the lady trim ladies, and that was where if you were a 21-year-old lad, you went in with some trepidation, I have to tell you.
I used to make a will before I went in there, in the River Plant, because you took your life in your hands when you went in there. You know? They were great ones.
All around me, I see the purple shades of evening.
For years, Ford's women had been paid less than men. In 1968, they had had enough and walked out.
We are on strike.
All of you?
All of us, all the machinists anyway.
So no car seat covers for Fords?
No, not from us anyway.
We wanted to be recognised that we were skilled workers. That was the main thing.
And somehow or other it got changed along the way that we was fighting for equal pay.
It was a fight that stopped Ford in its tracks.
So as soon as the ladies went out on strike, there were no seats to be assembled, there were no cars to be assembled, so immediately all the labour gets laid off.
And not only here, but on the continent as well.
Europe.
Because a lot of our
Europe
stuff
down.
used to go to the continent as well. And they were being laid off as well. And so we began to feel really powerful by then.
They went to the very top and marched on Parliament.
We've got 5,000 men laid off as a result of this now.
Yes.
Does this not worry you?
No, of course it worries me, but we've all got that responsibility. But if we always study the men, we'll never get anywhere.
They almost got more than they bargained for.
I'm walking about outside the Houses of Parliament, and on my banner it said, we want sex equality. And all the lorry drivers, all the buses, everybody was all pointing at me saying, yes, yeah. I thought, what the hell's the matter with them? When one of the women spotted it, me equality had rolled out, and all I was saying was, we want sex. 100 and odd women walking about saying, we want... Can you imagine the traffic out there come to a standstill? It can only happen to me, I know.
The women made it all the way into our history books as Employment Secretary Barbara Castle pushed equal pay through Parliament.
Don't you think you've acted in a completely irresponsible manner with this strike?
No, definitely not. No, we've had to fight for it, haven't we? We knew we was fighting for something that was right.
Everything you have, we have to struggle for. Those women did more for equal pay in this country than any other group of women, in my opinion.
Ford's women had won a sex equality. Now we wanted sex.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff at 16 minutes after the hour.
In the summer of love, they launched the Ford version of the sports car that suggested something bigger.
Right. Mark 50 seconds and we're go.
Well, the 60s was a decade of hedonism. It was a decade of having a good time. And initially there was shame and guilt about it, but by the end of the 60s, people were being brazen. The Capri was a reflection of the muscle cars from America. And there are lots of different types of muscles. So there's the power, but there's also the potency, and there's the sexual muscle. So here's a car with this long, powerful bonnet. And most men are going to jump in that and go, I've got a long, powerful bonnet, therefore I'm going to attract a lot of women.
It's an extension of your penis, isn't it? Let's face it. Your car is a great big cock, and that's the advantage of it. It's just thrusting out there through the road, through the open countryside, and no accident that they make them that shape. And that sports cars, the sportier the car, the more phallic it looks.
From the very beginning, I knew it was the car I always promised myself. The new Ford Capri, a fantastic shape.
Here was something now that I'd fallen in love with, and there wasn't anyone else but Ford that offered it to me, because no one could attract me in quite that way.
Great fun to drive. You sit low, arms straight, almost racing position. What else can a man ask for? Except maybe a little privacy.
The Capri is a car which is, I think, a reward for any promise. She is exquisite. Rather like being lucky enough to catch up with Miss World and have her say, "Will you date me?" She's smooth, easy to run, talks to you nicely, that wonderful burble as you go down the road. And then, besides all of that, you've been seduced by the smells and the sound, and then you look and find that you've got an absolute beauty. The Capri, when you're driving it, is undoubtedly sexual. She's a car which suddenly heightens all of your senses and makes you want to be a part of her. You're driving down the road, you have a complete union, the constructed vehicle and the skilled driver.
The Capri scored big time. To ram it home, Ford showed a professional approach to product placement.
45 and 37, okay, you are clear. Have a good weekend, over.
Thank you, darling, and the same to you, over and out.
But Ford's Capri so nearly missed its big break.
Watch out!
Not a lot of people remember that in the first series of the professionals, Gordon Jackson and the other two drove British Leyland products, a TR7, a Dolomite Sprint, and I think he had one of those wedge-shaped Ambassadors. British Leyland couldn't get the importance of what this show was doing for their cars. So after filming every day, they would take them back. And then when they rang the next week and said, "Can we have those cars back because we're filming another show?" BL would go, "No, I'm sorry, mate, they've been booked out, you know, to auto car." And they would send another one down a different colour.
When Capri came, it was sort of heaven sent, and the car was brought forward very early for them and placed and loaned for 3 or 4 months at a time and used for all the stunts.
Leyland lost again. But Ford's British Capris couldn't compete with those made in Germany. UK cars were crap.
We used to call them Friday afternoon cars because we were convinced that on Friday afternoon, just about when everybody was ready to go home, they would throw the last set of cars together, and they weren't put together properly.
The quality in Halewood, compared with the quality in the rest of Europe, couldn't match. So the dealers did not want, and the customers did not want cars from Britain. So they demanded cars from the continental plants.
Facing the crisis, Ford took the dealers to Halewood to prove British Capris were as good as any.
However, on the day that we took the dealers in to see the product, there was a minor industrial dispute at Halewood, and as the dealers drove in their buses, the workforce was marching out down the other side of the gate. They came in, they inspected an empty plant, and that was the end of another rather good idea.
But it wasn't the end of the strikes. Throughout the 70s, Ford lost up to 1 day in 4 to industrial action.
It was anarchy. I mean, nobody knew who was running those plants at times, because nobody was running those plants at times.
We give this country and Ford 40% in 2 years.
Some men went on the rampage. They wrecked the manager's canteen, set fire to tables and chairs.
You had Black Dwarf, you had the International Socialists, you had the Communists, you had the Trotskyite, you name it, we had everyone.
Will this be the end of industrial trouble at Ford's for the time being? Straight answer, no.
In the bitterest battle of all, the Labour government used Ford to force through its policy limiting pay increases to 5%.
When the pay policy was announced, the government expected every company to abide by the 5%. Totally unworkable in practice, but it was seen to be the test of government credibility.
Ford UK made 100 million that year. The unions wanted their share.
We had the 5%, no more than 5%. And clearly the unions weren't going to accept that. And we were just caught in the middle between the government and the unions.
You know that the company have offered 5% plus productivity talks. In our opinion, nowhere does it meet the claims and aspirations of the Ford workers.
Ford saw the reality that we weren't going to move, despite the fact that it was the government that we supported. And Ford's just looked at what they were losing and thought, to hell with this, you know.
There has to be a time when you're holding a huge investment in your own particular business, where you have to say, we cannot afford to hold out any longer. So come to a settlement which is reasonable, but settle.
Ford settled for 17%. Other companies followed. The government's wage policy was in ruins. The winter of discontent was upon us. Ford's unions had helped bring down a Labour government.
Every time I've been on interviews since, they say, well, you know, you were responsible for the Labour government being defeated. I said, no, the Labour government was responsibility for the Labour government being defeated. You could say I played a part in it. I wasn't helpful, but my job wasn't to be helpful. My job was to represent Ford workers, you know, and their interests, which I tried to do.
Ford's unions had helped give us Maggie. As her Britain boomed, Ford was set to face a flash flood of foreign competition.
Back in the 80s, everything seemed possible. It was an era of you want it, go out and get it, and a lot of people did.
Porsche, BMW and Golf GTI sales took off. Ford fought back with a souped-up Escort.
We bespoiled it, we re-engined it, we put big wide wheels on the vehicle. We made it look a bit like a roller skate, so its stance was fantastic. You look at it from behind and you knew it meant business.
It was a blue-collar sports car. The Escort was one of the icons of the early 80s in that here's a car that's good fun to drive, it's pretty selfish, you know, it's pretty hedonistic, but the whole country's going that way.
The first time I saw an XR3 was back in September 1980. The car had just come out and I followed one through Rotherham with a girlfriend at the time, and I remember pointing it out and saying, that's an XR3i and it's just come out, and we followed it for a couple of miles and I decided then that I would have one. On the day that I got the car, I remember taking it to work and parking it outside work and going up onto the department where I work, and they all came out and had a look at it, and I just felt $1 million. It was a real achievement.
XR3s were hot, but some got so hot they were smoking, as joyriders stole their slice of the action.
There was so much of a buzz about them that if you were I've always said this, if I grew up on a sink estate somewhere, I was 17 and I saw a guy naked, I'd take it for a spin round Woolworths. Definitely, I don't need some complex psychoanalysis or profiling. Great, I'll have that race round Woolworths, count me in.
The insurance industry slapped great big premiums on XRs, and a lot of sporty Fords suffered as well, so the end of the dream came when the XR badge was scrapped.
the XR3 was sunk. Throughout the 80s, foreign importers flooded the market with seductive offers. More than half of us were buying cars from abroad.
The importers were becoming more important, notably the Japanese.
At first, the Japanese didn't get it, but they soon caught up.
We had a little phrase, we used to call them Jap crap, but it was quite unfounded actually, because you'd see the Japanese, but you never actually got to deal with too many of them, because they were more reliable than our cars that were coming out.
The sound on a crisp British morning of that noise of a million Fords not starting, because Ford never had proper starter motors, and then there'd be the boom, and then the Datsun would be off to work.
Japanese cars worked, and they were cheap. Ford went to Japan to find out why.
I saw transmission plants, engine plants, I saw the assembly plants. I asked the questions, I was given honest answers, and I was just astonished. No, it was a different world.
Bill was the one with the foresight, the intelligence, and finally the balls to say, we cannot ignore what's happening in Japan.
We'd accepted that these people are very smart, they're very efficient, they're very competitive, and they're going to eat our lunch unless we really get off our backsides and improve our performance.
The British car industry was collapsing. To survive, Ford had to take drastic action and change their image.
The Sierra, I think, was a groundbreaking vehicle for Ford because it really threw out everything that had come before it.
Suddenly, we had this revolution called Sierra. Daring aerodynamic design, crafted in the wind tunnel, almost a fuselage-like look to the body, with the windows cut into the side of the fuselage.
The Sierra was meant to be a beacon of modern design, and if I recall, it was launched with the concept of man and machine in perfect harmony.
Great concept, just one slight problem.
They took one look at the Sierra and they said,
It was a truly, properly ugly car, the Sierra. That's what people, ooh, Jelly Mold brave. It wasn't Jelly Mold, it wasn't brave, it was just plain ugly.
The first couple of years of the Sierra were, from my point of view, for example, as a marketing man, were a nightmare.
It was a mistake, pure and simple. It was a mistake.
To get Sierra back on track, Ford went back to its old tricks.
Old recipes seemed to work. They went out and they won rallies in it, and they started to win British Touring Car Championship, and Sierra Cosworth also, unfortunately, became a very desirable motor car to be stolen.
I always remember the first report of this bunch of crooks driving away from the bank in a Sierra, and I always remember the sales director saying, well, finally, we have the endorsement of the criminal fraternity.
I was canvassing in the Midlands on an ordinary suburban estate. I met a man polishing his Ford Sierra, self-employed electrician. Dad always voted Labour. He used to vote Labour, he said.
When we heard Tony Blair talk about Sierra Man, we thought, does that, is this good or bad? And we decided we'd rather have Sierra Man and Mondeo Man than Vectra Man or, Peugeot Man or whatever it was. Because it meant that Ford was part of the fabric of society and regarded as that.
Ford had adapted and survived. It was king of the mass market. But now we had a new champion to cut through the marketing hype.
hadn't been on Top Gear very long, and then they asked me if I'd review a Granada that they'd stuck a boot on the back. And I was pretty rude about it. I think I said that it was like a Granada with an aircraft carrier nailed on the back.
Ford say that it makes you stand out in a crowd. Indeed it does. But so does walking around with a halibut on your head. They say it's bold and imaginative. I say it's ugly.
And Ford, it was like the first time anyone had ever been rude about a car on Top Gear. And Ford were pretty cross and dispatched someone from the press office to see bosses.
And I went to Birmingham and I met a nice man called John King at 7:30 in the morning who said, yes, I think he went over the top, but I have to tell you, he doesn't know how large he will actually become in for British TV terms. He said, only I know that. He said, and you have a choice. You can either have a motoring program that's watched by 500 people, or you can have one which is watched by 3 to 5 million. And I will always hand you the right of reply. So, you know, it's your choice. I said, well, we really don't have an argument, do we?
Since that day, Ford has never, ever complained about anything I've ever said about one of their cars. And that's weird because Vauxhall explode every time you say that the cigarette lighter's the wrong shape, and Toyota have banned me from driving cars. And, you know, you can't libel a car.
So what we have here is a car that's average. A car that does everything you could reasonably expect of it, averagely. If it was food, it would be a potato.
The first Mondeo didn't make Clarkson's mouth water. So this time, Ford simply went back and made it better.
I've just spent the last week driving this car, and I can tell you this. The potato has become a crinkly-edged, oven-ready chip. Yum, yum.
Here's something which sounds blasphemous, but I promise you, the current Ford Mondeo is at least as good to drive as the equivalent Mercedes-Benz. But you will still meet people nowadays who will say something, oh, my darling, I couldn't have a Ford.
She came from Greece, she had a thirst for knowledge.
As Britain was becoming a more aspirational country, we started wanting, fish and chips. Oh, no, thanks, I want something drizzled with juice. And there was Garni appearing on pub menus. We just exploded out of our post-war morass, really, sometime in the 80s. And Ford just got left behind. I don't want a Ford, you know? I'm a child of the 21st century. I don't want a Ford.
You wanna live like common people.
To satisfy us, Ford had to go beyond its blue oval badge.
Ford realised that as a single brand, they couldn't be all things to all people. There were prestige and niche markets that, try as they might, they just couldn't hit.
There's enormous brand loyalty or brand desire, and sometimes you simply can't crack that, so you go with the flow. Get a brand, and that's what Ford did with the Jaguar.
And Aston Martin and Land Rover. Today, Ford runs a portfolio of posh British brands, with posh prices to boot.
It doesn't cost that much more to make a Jaguar X-Type than a Ford Mondeo. I mean, basically underneath, they're actually pretty much the same car. But you can charge more for the Jag because it's got a Jag badge. I mean, that's how it works. No matter who you are, no matter how much you earn, no matter what you want from a car, Ford's got you. They've got us all.
You can find more information about all the businesses in this series on the And Me website at www.bbc.co.uk/business.